What would you do if a stranger sat beside you in the darkest hour of your life and somehow knew exactly what your heart had lost before you even said a word? The hospital lights were too white, too sterile. They buzzed faintly overhead, casting a dull, humming glow that made everything feel colder than it already was. Daniel Brooks sat hunched on a hard plastic chair, elbows on knees, hands clenched around a small stuffed bunny. The bunny's ears were frayed, the fur patchy from years of comfort. It didn't belong in this waiting room. It belonged in the arms of his daughter, Lily, rising and falling gently with every peaceful breath. But right now those breaths were a fight. She'd been fine that morning. Laughing, singing off-key in the back seat as she packed her school bag. Then came the coughing, the panic in her voice, the desperate clutching at her chest, and Daniel's frantic drive through red lights and icy roads to get here. The emergency room doors had closed over an hour ago. Every time a nurse or doctor walked through, Daniel's chest clenched with a hope he couldn't name. But it wasn't his name they called. He stared straight ahead, seeing everything and nothing all at once. This wasn't his first time in a room like this. Different hospital, different crisis. The last time, he had held his wife's hand until it went still. He hadn't cried then. But now, in this too-quiet room with only an old man dozing in the corner and a disinterested nurse at the desk, Daniel broke. He bent forward and let the tears fall. Quiet, shaking, desperate. Not for himself, but for Lily. For all the things he couldn't fix with duct tape and a wrench. For all the ways life had been harder than it should have been. He didn't hear the soft footsteps, didn't notice when someone sat down beside him. Only when a voice low, warm and steady broke the silence did he realize he wasn't alone. "I'm sorry," the woman said. He turned slightly. She looked out of place in this room. Expensive coat, calm expression, a stillness about her that didn't match the hum of urgency in the air. "My name's Evelyn," she said, voice like glass. "I don't know what you're going through, but I know what it's like to wait behind those doors." Daniel didn't respond right away. He simply nodded. She didn't offer cliches, didn't say, "Everything will be okay." She just sat with him, present. Still, and somehow that was enough. The coffee from the vending machine was burnt and bitter, but Daniel drank it anyway. Not for the taste, but for the warmth in his hands. The woman beside him, Evelyn Hale, sipped hers like it was a quiet ritual. She hadn't said much since she sat down. Just her name and that small offering of understanding. It was more than anyone else had done. "You don't have to stay," Daniel finally muttered, his voice rough from hours of silence. "I know," she said, "but I want to." He glanced at her, really looked. She was beautiful, in a distant kind of way, refined, polished. But her eyes, they were tired, like someone who had seen storms and survived them. "My daughter's name is Lily," he said, voice steadier now. "She's 7. Asthma hit out of nowhere." Evelyn nodded. "I'm sorry." He hesitated. Then added, "Her mom passed away 3 years ago." "I lost my husband last year," Evelyn replied, her tone quiet, but not fragile. "Nathan." The silence between them changed then. No longer awkward. Now filled with something heavier, shared pain, shared history, shared strength. A nurse finally appeared, stepping through the doors with a clipboard in hand. "Daniel Brooks?" she asked gently. He shot to his feet, the coffee falling from his lap. "She's stable," the nurse said with a soft smile. "The medication worked." "She's resting." Daniel froze, just for a moment. Then all the breath he'd been holding crashed out of him. He dropped back into the chair, face in his hands. Relief poured out of him like a flood. Quiet sobs. Shoulders shaking. Evelyn didn't say anything. She didn't need to. She simply stayed. Later, when he returned from Lily's room, the waiting area was almost empty. Except now, So was the chair beside his. No coffee, no coat, no perfume in the air. Just the memory of a woman who had sat with him in silence, when silence was all he had. Daniel stood there for a long time, staring at that empty seat. Something in his chest stirred. Not regret, not longing, gratitude. She had stayed when he needed it most, and even though she was gone, her presence lingered like a quiet echo. He didn't know her last name. Only Evelyn. But in a life that had known more loss than light just for a moment, someone had shared the weight, and that changed everything. The scent of antiseptic still clung to Daniel's coat as he walked through the front door of their small house. It wasn't much peeling wallpaper, cracked linoleum, a draft in the hallway they still hadn't fixed, but it was home. It was Lily's safe place. She had been discharged just that morning, still pale, but smiling, tired, but stubbornly insisting she was fine. Now she was asleep on the couch, one arm wrapped around her bunny, her chest rising and falling in peaceful rhythm. Daniel sat on the edge of the coffee table and watched her for a long time. He had seen her struggle to breathe, seen her lips turn grey, her little hands reach for something, anything that could help. It never got easier. And yet, she was still here. He exhaled slowly, head bowed. "Thank you," he whispered to no one in particular. But in his heart, he knew the words weren't just for the doctors. They were for Evelyn. He hadn't expected her. People didn't just sit beside strangers anymore. Not in silence, not without expectation, not without judgment. But she had. She had brought coffee and calm. She had spoken just enough. And somehow, that had been everything. Daniel couldn't stop thinking about her. He didn't even know her full name. Didn't know why she had walked into that hospital lobby in the first place. All he knew was that she'd left a mark. Subtle, but undeniable. At the garage, later that day, his mind drifted. The engine in front of him was simple, an oil leak, easy fix, but his hands hesitated. Not because he didn't know what to do, because something in him felt distracted. He reached for the socket wrench and dropped it. "Whoa," said a voice from across the shop. "That's twice this week, man. You need more coffee or less thinking?" Daniel looked up to see Raymond Cruz, his longtime co-worker, grinning from the office window. "Didn't sleep much," Daniel muttered. "Daniel." Raymond walked over, wiping his hands on a rag. "How's the kid?" "She's okay," Daniel said. "Scared me half to death, but she's okay." Raymond nodded. "Kids are tough. You look like someone just walked out of your life or into it." Daniel didn't answer. Instead, he turned back to the car. But his silence said enough. That night, after Lily was tucked in, Daniel sat at the kitchen table with a stack of bills in front of him. Water, heat, groceries. And the hospital invoice that hadn't even arrived yet. But he could already feel its weight. He rubbed his temples, then leaned back in the creaking chair. His phone buzzed. A news headline flashed across the screen, sent by Raymond. He nearly ignored it, figuring it was some sports update, until the name in the title caught his eye. Evelyn Hale returns to public eye, 1 year after husband's death. Daniel blinked. The article was short. A charity event, a photo, a few lines about her late husband Nathan Hale, founder of Hale Row, a luxury design empire. The photo stopped him cold. Same woman, same calm face, same eyes that had met his in that waiting room. Grace, she'd said when they met. But now he knew Evelyn Hale. He sat back, stunned. She hadn't told him who she was. She hadn't led with money or fame or influence. She had just sat with him. As a person. He swallowed hard. Emotions knotted in his throat. He should have said more. Should have asked her full name, thanked her properly, something. Now she was back in her world of penthouses and gala events. And he was here, elbow deep in oil, surrounded by unpaid bills and hollow silence. The next day passed in a blur. Lily asked if they could draw stars on the sidewalk with chalk. He said yes, but his thoughts weren't with the chalk. They were with the woman who hadn't tried to fix him but had stayed long enough to remind him he wasn't broken. He didn't expect to see her again. So when her voice came from behind him in the hospital lobby 3 days later, he nearly dropped his daughter's backpack. "Hi," he turned. Evelyn stood there wearing a navy coat and soft smile. No cameras. No fanfare. Just her. "I hope this isn't crossing a line," she said. Daniel opened his mouth. Nothing came out. She looked down briefly, then back up. "I just wanted to check on Lily. And you." Lily, wide-eyed, peeked from behind her father's leg. "Is that the lady who gave you coffee?" she whispered. Evelyn knelt. "I did, and I brought tacos today, if that's okay?" Lily's face lit up. Daniel laughed softly, shaking his head. "You didn't have to do that." "I know," Evelyn said, eyes gentle, "but I wanted to." At a corner booth in a tiny diner, Evelyn sipped black coffee while Lily devoured chips and guacamole. Daniel watched them, his daughter and the woman who had sat with him when the world was crumbling. Evelyn didn't dominate the conversation. She asked questions. She laughed at Lily's stories. She let the child shine, and Daniel realized something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. Peace. Not because everything was fixed, not because the pain had disappeared, but because someone saw it and stayed anyway. He looked at Evelyn across the table, and for the first time in a long while, he felt the first flicker of something he thought he'd lost forever. Hope. The snow had melted into slush, leaving the streets of Maplewood wet and grey. Daniel Brooks leaned under the hood of a rusty Chevrolet, sleeves rolled up, hands coated in grease. The engine groaned like it resented being touched. But it wasn't the engine that made his head ache today. It was her, Evelyn Hale. He still couldn't wrap his head around it. The woman who had sat next to him in silence at the hospital, the same woman who'd brought tacos for Lily and shared stories over burnt diner coffee, was worth more than he'd make in 10 lifetimes. He hadn't told her he'd seen the article. He wasn't sure why. Maybe because he didn't want her to think he saw her differently. But truth be told, he did. Not in the way others might. He didn't resent her wealth, he just didn't know where he fit in it. Raymond Cruz elbowed him as he passed, smirking. "You've been wearing that same frown since Tuesday," Daniel grunted. "It's just the alternator." Raymond leaned against the workbench, crossing his arms. "Sure, and the moon's made of cheese," Daniel sighed, wiped his hands. "It's complicated. She call you again?" "No." "You call her?" "No." Raymond raised a brow. "So, basically, you're both waiting for the other one to blink." Daniel didn't answer. He didn't know how to explain that Evelyn Hale was the first person in years who made him feel like a man again. Not just a father, not just a mechanic, not just someone getting by, but someone seen. And now he wasn't sure if he could measure up. That night, after Lily was tucked in with a bedtime story and her inhaler close by, Daniel sat at the kitchen table staring at a stack of unpaid bills and Evelyn's name glowing on his phone. He didn't call. He couldn't. Instead, he stepped outside, letting the cold air cut through the noise in his head. He leaned on the porch railing, sipping coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. What was he doing? He couldn't offer her anything. He didn't own his house. He drove a truck that coughed when it turned. He couldn't even afford new snow boots for Lily without skipping groceries. And she wore coats that probably cost more than his rent. She didn't just live in another world, she was another world. Still she'd sat beside him in that waiting room. Still she'd learned Lily's favorite juice flavor. Still she'd shown up and stayed. And that scared him more than anything else. Across town, Evelyn Hale stood barefoot in her kitchen, staring at a pot of untouched pasta. She wasn't used to being the one wondering. She had empires at her fingertips, but no certainty in her chest. It had been 5 days since she'd seen Daniel. She had debated texting him. But then the whispers started at meetings, during brunches, in passing comments from board members and well-dressed donors. "You're spending time with a mechanic? What is he after? Don't let this become a headline." She hated it. Hated that her life was lived under a microscope. Hated that kindness had to be justified. But most of all, she hated that the distance between her and Daniel now felt wider than any dollar sign. The next morning, a large white envelope appeared in Daniel's mailbox. He recognized the handwriting instantly. Graceful, precise. Inside was a note. "Daniel, you don't owe me anything, least of all pride. But if there's ever a moment you let someone stand beside you really stand, I hope it's one that doesn't pass you by. I saw the shop. I saw the way you talked to those kids outside, the way they listened. There's something there. Something worth building." Evelyn, tucked behind the note, was a folded sketch, a community garage. Part classroom, part workshop, a place where kids who didn't belong anywhere else could learn something real, something useful, something lasting. His name was written on the bottom in soft pencil. Director, Daniel Brooks. Daniel stared at it for a long time. He didn't know whether to laugh, cry, or tear it in half. Later that night, Evelyn found herself walking through the old community center district. The stars were barely visible through the light haze of the city. She didn't care. She needed to see him. The garage was still lit when she arrived, humming with fluorescent glow. She stood at the open bay door, watching Daniel work alone. He didn't see her at first. She waited. Then finally he turned. He froze, eyes narrowing, then softening. "Evelyn." "I'm not here to rescue anyone," she said simply. "I'm here because I believe in something. In you." Daniel stepped back from the engine, wiping his hands. "I never asked for a foundation, or sketches, or plans. I know. I can't pay you back. I'm not asking you to." Silence stretched between them. Then he looked up. "I don't want to be someone you invest in," he said, voice low. "I want to be someone who stands next to you, not behind you." Evelyn stepped forward, close enough for their breath to meet. "Then stand," she whispered. And for the first time, Daniel didn't flinch. The front gate of Evelyn Hale's estate let out its familiar groan as it closed behind her black SUV. She barely noticed it now, but Daniel Brooks, who stood with his hands deep in his jacket pockets at the bottom of the gravel path, winced slightly. "I can fix that," he said. Evelyn looked at him from the top of the steps. "It's just a gate." Daniel shrugged. "Even small things get loud when you ignore them too long." She smiled soft, knowing, and motioned him inside. In the days since she'd handed him the sketch for the community garage, something between them had shifted. He didn't reject it, didn't throw it away or toss it back at her. Instead, he had come back, quietly, slowly. With tools in hand and sleeves rolled up, he started fixing things around her house. A squeaky hinge on the sunroom door, a rattling vent in the laundry chute, a leaking pipe in the greenhouse. He never asked for anything in return. Not money, not favors, just coffee. Conversation. A warm place to sit. Evelyn didn't offer anything he didn't ask for, but she gave what mattered most: space. And Daniel filled it not with grand gestures, but with quiet presence. Steady hands, honest laughter. Eyes that didn't judge. One afternoon, while Daniel adjusted the bolts on the garden fence, Lily ran barefoot across the lawn in mismatched socks, her laughter rising like wind chimes in spring. Evelyn followed behind, holding a pitcher of lemonade. She handed Daniel a glass, and their hands brushed, just briefly.
You keep showing up like this, she teased, and I'm going to start breaking things just to watch you fix them. Daniel chuckled, sipping his drink. Then I guess I'll keep showing up. But peace never stayed too long. Not when the past still had something to say. That weekend, Evelyn sat across from Clarissa Hale, her sister-in-law, in the mahogany-lined conference room of the Hale Foundation. I saw the photos, Clarissa said flatly, crossing her arms. Evelyn didn't look up from her notes. Good morning to you too. Clarissa pushed a magazine across the table. The glossy cover showed Evelyn standing outside the garage, Daniel beside her, Lily holding her hand. You're playing house in the suburbs now. Evelyn's jaw tightened. His name is Daniel, she said calmly, and her name is Lily. Clarissa scoffed. You think the board won't care? You're the face of this legacy, of Nathan's legacy. I'm also a human being. You're a Hale. You don't get to make sloppy choices. Evelyn stood collecting her papers. The only thing sloppy in that photo is your judgment. But the words stuck deep and bitter like splinters under her skin. Across town, Daniel wasn't having a better time. He sat in the living room of Margaret Bennett, his late wife's mother, sipping lukewarm coffee that tasted like guilt. Lily played in the next room, oblivious. Margaret studied him the same way she had at the funeral, tight-lipped and searching. She's beautiful, she said, meaning Evelyn. But she's not Anna. Daniel nodded. I know. She doesn't know what it means to struggle. She knows what grief is. Margaret folded her hands. So what is this really? A distraction? Daniel took a breath. It's not a replacement. It's something new, something good. She's not from this world, Daniel. She'll leave. Or worse, she'll try to fix what she doesn't understand. She hasn't tried to fix me, she just sees me. Margaret didn't respond, but the silence pressed in like a cold front. When Daniel left, Lily ran out to hug her grandmother. Margaret smiled, but her eyes lingered on him, not angry, not cold. Just uncertain. That night, Daniel sat on his porch, elbows on knees, staring into the dark. Evelyn hadn't called. He hadn't either. They were both retreating into old habits, pulling back when things got real. But maybe it wasn't fear. Maybe it was mourning. For the past they couldn't undo. For the people who still lived inside them, even in absence. For the weight of expectations, heavy as rusted chains. Inside, Lily's soft voice floated from the hallway. Daddy, are you mad at Grace? He blinked. What? I drew her a card, Lily said, padding out with bare feet. She held up a folded page covered in purple marker. Can we send it? Daniel stared at the page. On it were 3 stick figures, hand in hand beneath a yellow sun. I miss her, Lily whispered. You smile more when she's around. His heart clenched. He hadn't realized how much Lily saw, how much she understood. And maybe, just maybe, he'd been running from the wrong things. The letter arrived the next morning, slipped under Evelyn's front mat, edges slightly damp from early frost. It was addressed simply, to Grace, from Lily. Evelyn sat on the bench in her foyer, coat still on, scarf still loose, fingers trembling as she opened it. Dear Grace, thank you for the boots and the cocoa. Thank you for teaching me how to braid. Thank you for making Daddy smile again. He doesn't smile like that with anyone else, not even me. I miss you. Love, Lily. Evelyn pressed the paper to her chest. It wasn't the crayon hearts at the bottom that undid her. It was that one line. Thank you for making Daddy smile again. Because she hadn't realized how much she needed to hear that she mattered. That she'd done something right, that this wasn't one-sided. Across town, Daniel waited at the garage. He didn't know if she'd come. He didn't expect forgiveness or even understanding. But when her car pulled into the lot just before sundown and she stepped out with Lily's letter still in her hands, he felt something lift in his chest. She didn't speak right away. She just walked up, pressed the letter into his palm, and looked him in the eye. "I never wanted to fix you," she said. "I just wanted to be where you didn't have to carry it all alone." Daniel didn't speak either. He just nodded, and in that moment the air between them softened. Not because the doubts had disappeared, but because something deeper had taken their place. Understanding. The garage was quiet except for the low hiss of a space heater and the occasional click of tools being returned to their proper drawers. It was late, too late for anyone to still be working, but Daniel Brooks wasn't ready to leave just yet. He paced slowly between the lifted frame of a half-repaired Civic and a crude chalk outline on the wall. The sketch Evelyn had given him, the blueprint for a community auto center, was now pinned beside the calendar, curled slightly at the edges. In his hand, he held a folded permit application, one that she'd already secured, one with his name on it. Director, Daniel Brooks. He ran his fingers across the ink like it might smudge, like it might vanish if he looked too hard. He still didn't know what scared him more, that someone like Evelyn Hale believed in him that much, or that deep down, he was beginning to believe it too. The next morning, he found her waiting outside the shop in a navy coat, holding a tablet, and wearing that half-curious, half-confident look she wore whenever she was about to challenge him. "I have a proposal," she said, skipping pleasantries. Daniel wiped his hands and leaned against the garage door. "You always do." "This time it's not a donation," she said. "It's a partnership." He raised an eyebrow. "I'll fund the space, secure the tools, find the startup staff," Evelyn explained. "You run it. Teach, guide, train kids who would never otherwise get this chance." Daniel crossed his arms. "Why me?" Her eyes softened. "Because you're the kind of man who changes lives without even realizing it." He looked away. Her words hit too close. "You don't just fix engines," she continued. "You see what's broken in people, and you give them the space to fix themselves." Daniel swallowed hard. "And Lily?" he asked quietly. "We'll make sure she's taken care of. The center won't take you away from her. It'll give her something to look up to." Silence stretched between them. Then Daniel gave a soft exhale and nodded once. "Okay," he said, "let's build something." They met every other night after Lily was asleep, spreading blueprints across her kitchen island, debating paint colors, flooring materials, insurance forms, and zoning permits. Daniel came with calloused hands and a head full of doubts. Evelyn came with crisp folders and quiet determination. What they built in those nights wasn't just a building, it was a bridge. Between her world and his, between who they'd been and who they could become. Weeks passed. The town started whispering. Some good-natured. "About time someone did something for the kids around here." Some less so. Garage charity or not, she's still out of his league. Daniel tried to ignore it, but late at night, when the house was quiet and Lily was dreaming, the doubts crept in. Was this real? Would it last? Did he belong in her life, or was he just a project that would eventually get shelved? Evelyn felt it too, the way people looked at them in public, the way old friends raised eyebrows at brunches. She hadn't grown up with wealth, but after marrying Nathan, she learned how to carry it. She had also learned how lonely it could be. But Daniel, he grounded her. He didn't care about headlines. He didn't ask for anything but truth. And in his silence, she found peace she hadn't known since the day Nathan died. Still, she worried about overwhelming him, about pushing too hard, about reaching for something too soon. One rainy evening, they sat on the floor of the community center's empty main room. The walls had just been painted. The smell of fresh hope still clung to the air. Daniel leaned back on his hands, staring up at the ceiling beams. "I didn't think dreams like this belonged to people like me," he said. Evelyn smiled gently. "Dreams don't belong to anyone. You just have to be brave enough to claim them." He turned his head, eyes searching hers. "And us?" he asked. "Do you think we're part of that dream?" or just something borrowed until life goes back to normal? Evelyn's throat tightened. She took his hand. You're not borrowed, Daniel. You're the part I didn't know I was missing. He didn't answer right away, but his fingers closed gently around hers.
And that was enough. Opening day came with folding chairs, donated coffee, and a crowd of curious faces from all over Maplewood. Lily sat in the front row, swinging her legs beneath a too-big hoodie and holding a homemade sign, "My dad builds things." Daniel stood in front of a cheap microphone, nervous fingers crumpling the speech he never quite finished writing. He looked out at the roomette kids from the high school shop class, at the mayor in a wrinkled suit, at Evelyn near the back with a quiet smile, and took a breath. "I'm not good with speeches," he said plainly, "but I know what it's like to grow up thinking second chances are for other people." He paused. "This place isn't just about tools or cars. It's about giving someone the space to believe they're worth fixing." Applause broke out, rough and honest, and Evelyn's hands were the first to clap. Later that night, long after the last chair was folded, Daniel stood in the middle of the garage, surrounded by silence and oil-scented concrete. Evelyn joined him, heels echoing softly against the floor. She didn't say anything, just reached for his hand. And in that still moment, surrounded by grease-stained dreams and fluorescent lights, they both understood. This wasn't about saving each other. It was about building something that lasted together. The headline landed on the breakfast table before Daniel even poured his coffee. "Billionaire widow finds love with small-town mechanic." Below the bold print was a photo him and Evelyn Hale, standing outside the newly opened community garage, her hand resting lightly on his arm. Both smiling, unaware anyone was watching, he stared at it. Not with pride, not with shame, just stillness. The article was short, filled with speculation and polished phrasing like unlikely romance and an unusual pairing from different worlds. They made it sound like a fairy tale. Except real life didn't come with narrators or happy ever after guarantees. It came with whispers. By mid-morning, the shop phone rang off the hook not for repairs, but for comments. "Is it true? You're dating that Evelyn Hale? Does she fund the whole garage?" Daniel said little, kept his head down. Let the talk wrench do the talking. But even his co-workers weren't subtle. Raymond Cruz waved the paper in his face the second he walked into the shop. "Page 1, man, you've arrived." Daniel shot him a look. "I'm serious." Raymond chuckled. "Didn't know dating a billionaire was your retirement plan." "It's not," Daniel said flatly. Raymond backed off, but the smirks kept coming, and Daniel kept tightening bolts like his hands could keep the gossip from spreading. The town, once supportive and curious, now leaned on curiosity more than support. At the grocery store, "Bet she'll get tired of playing house." At the diner, "He's riding her coattails." Even at Lily's school, a PTA mom whispered loudly enough to be heard, "What's a woman like that doing dropping off a child in this part of town?" Daniel heard it all. He didn't always respond. But it built inside him, like rust, slow. Quiet, destructive. Evelyn wasn't untouched either. The Hale Foundation's board called a special meeting. Words like image and optics floated through the mahogany-lined room like smoke. She sat with her back straight, hands folded, gaze unblinking. "He is not a PR strategy," she said calmly. "He's a human being, a good man." One board member sighed. "But he's not from our world, Evelyn." "No," she agreed. "And maybe that's a good thing." They didn't have a response for that. That evening, Evelyn waited outside the garage as the sun dipped low, painting the street in long gold shadows. Daniel stepped out, grease still on his hands, jaw tight. "You seen it?" he asked. Evelyn nodded. "You weren't supposed to get dragged into this." She tilted her head. "You think I didn't know who I was loving?" He looked away. "You're a headline now." "Because of me." "No," she said firmly. "I'm a headline because people are uncomfortable with what they don't understand." He didn't answer. So she stepped closer.
Do you believe them? He finally met her eyes. I believe I don't belong in your world. Her voice softened. Then let's build a new one. They didn't kiss, didn't hold hands in that moment, but something passed between them, stronger than touch. Resolve. Still, the noise didn't stop. Paparazzi showed up outside the community center. Teenagers gawked, snapping photos for TikTok. One tabloid even published a side-by-side of Daniel's modest house and Evelyn's penthouse, captioned, "From wrenches to riches." Daniel saw it at the gas station. Didn't say a word. Just folded the paper in half and threw it into the trash. That night, after Lily was asleep and the dishes were done, Daniel sat on the porch with a beer in hand, staring at the stars. Evelyn pulled into the driveway quietly. She stepped out, wrapped in a wool coat, holding 2 cups of cocoa. "Still like yours plain?" she asked. He nodded. They sat side by side, steam curling into the cold night. "I didn't ask for this," he said after a long silence. "The headlines, the attention. I know. I'm not built for interviews and board meetings. You don't have to be." He glanced at her. "Then why are you still here?" She smiled faintly. "Because love isn't something I hand out like charity. And you're not a cause." He looked down at the cocoa in his hand. "It just feels like the louder the world gets, the smaller we feel." Evelyn reached over and touched his hand. "Then let's stay small," she whispered. "Let the world be loud. We'll be quiet and real." Daniel let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding, then nodded. Later, after she'd left, he walked into Lily's room and tucked her in tighter. She stirred, half asleep. "Was that Grace?" "Yeah, sweetheart." "You smiled," she mumbled. Daniel blinked. "I did?" "Yeah." "Like, happy." He sat down beside her, brushing a curl from her cheek. "She makes me feel like I can breathe," he said softly. Then, as the night settled and the noise faded, Daniel realized something. Let them talk. Let them wonder. He knew who he was, and now finally he knew who he wanted beside him. The shop was quiet. That after-hours kind of quiet where every sound feels louder than it is. The heater hummed softly, battling the cold that seeped in through the concrete floor. A string of old Edison bulbs flickered above the workbench, casting a soft amber glow across the tools, the grease stains, and the dust motes hanging in the air. Daniel Brooks stood alone by the bench, running his hand over a small cloth-wrapped object. His heart thudded steady but heavy. Not with doubt, with intention. He'd been thinking about this moment for weeks, no, months. But every time he thought of grand restaurants, rooftop candlelight, or velvet ring boxes, it felt wrong. Evelyn Hale wasn't the kind of woman who needed diamonds. She was the kind of woman who needed truth. And Daniel only knew how to give it in the way he gave everything, simple, honest, and built to last. That night, Evelyn arrived wearing her usual quiet elegance, dark coat, soft scarf, and eyes that saw everything. "You've been fidgeting since dinner," she said with a small smile. "You planning something?" Daniel wiped his hands on a rag, then turned to the drawer beneath the workbench. "Sort of," he said, lifting out the bundle. "I made something." "For you?" Evelyn blinked, caught off guard. "Made?" He handed her the cloth, suddenly more nervous than he'd expected. "Go ahead." She unwrapped it slowly. Inside was a small chrome wrench no more than 6 inches long, polished, clean, beautiful in its simplicity. She stared at it for a moment, confused, until she noticed the engraving. "Together, always." Her breath caught. He stepped closer, hands in his jacket pockets. "I was going to do the whole thing ring, candles, maybe even a tux if I could borrow one that fit." She laughed, choked with emotion. "But none of that felt like us," he continued. This I know how to use." He nodded at the wrench. It's built to last. Like I want to be. She looked up, eyes glistening. You're proposing to me with a wrench, he smiled, with a lifetime warranty. A soft, broken laugh escaped her lips. Then she pressed the wrench to her chest. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Daniel, I will. He pulled her into his arms, grease on his hands, dust on his sleeves, and she didn't care. Because this wasn't about sparkle, it was about substance. And right there, in that old garage, under flickering lights and the faint smell of motor oil, love said yes.
Quiet, certain, and built from everything real. Word spread fast through Maplewood, not because of a press release, not because of paparazzi, but because Evelyn showed up at the diner wearing the wrench on a silver chain, and when Mrs. Dalton asked about it, she smiled and said, "It's a promise." That was enough. Everyone knew what it meant, even those who had doubted, especially those who had whispered. The days leading up to the wedding were quiet, peaceful even. There were no wedding planners, no TV coverage, no headline gossip, just friends. Just neighbors, just a small town watching two people put one brick at a time on a foundation they'd been building in silence. The ceremony would be held behind the Maplewood Community Auto Center, where they'd first laid the floorboards together. Lily drew hearts on the just married sign in purple marker. Raymond Cruz offered to grill hot dogs. Even the mayor volunteered folding chairs from City Hall. It wasn't grand, but it was theirs. The night before the wedding, Daniel stood on the porch of Evelyn's countryside cottage, staring up at the stars.
Evelyn stepped out beside him, wrapping her arms around his. "You okay?" "Yeah," he said. "Just thinking." "About?" He looked down at her, then back at the sky. "I never thought I'd find love again," he said quietly. "Not after Anna. Not after everything." Evelyn leaned her head on his shoulder. "And yet, here we are." "I used to think love had to be loud," he added. "Flashy, like the movies. And now?" He smiled. "Now I think it sounds like you whispering my name when you think I'm asleep." Her breath hitched. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a second wrench, this one even smaller, engraved simply, "For Lily. Always home." "She's part of us," he said, "and I wanted her to know she's never outside of what we're building." Evelyn took the tiny tool in her hands like it was made of gold.
And in a way it was. That night, sleep came easy, not because life was perfect, but because, for once, it didn't need to be. The morning of the wedding dawned grey and cool, with a gentle mist rolling over Maplewood, like a blessing whispered through the trees. Evelyn Hale opened her eyes to the quiet hum of wind against the windows and the faint scent of coffee drifting from the kitchen. She wasn't in a bridal suite, no makeup artists, no flower girls rehearsing steps, no champagne flutes clinking in celebration. She was home, wrapped in a worn flannel robe, heart beating slow, steady, and sure. In the corner, her wedding dresser, simple cream-wrap dress Lily helped pick out, hung quietly, waiting. No lace, no train, just soft cotton and a tiny silver wrench pinned to the collar, like a talisman. Across town, Daniel Brooks was brushing Lily's hair. She sat cross-legged on the kitchen counter, holding a peanut butter sandwich in one hand and humming quietly. "You nervous?" she asked through a mouthful. Daniel chuckled. "A little. Want me to walk with you?" He paused, then smiled. "More than anything," Lily beamed, "I already told the mayor I'm holding your hand the whole time." By 10 a.m., folding chairs lined the gravel behind the Maplewood Community Auto Center. Bales of hay doubled as benches. Old car doors were turned into welcome signs painted by local high schoolers. There were no tuxedos, just neighbors. There were no catering vans, just crockpots and homemade pies. The only thing fancier than Evelyn's dress was the twinkle in Daniel's eyes when he saw her walking down that makeshift aisle with the mist lifting behind her and Lily by her side. The crowd stood, not because a string quartet played, not because a wedding planner cued them, but because something in that moment felt sacred. The woman who had once stood behind a Fortune 500 boardroom table now walked barefoot on gravel, holding hands with a little girl. The man who once believed he didn't belong in her world now stood straight-backed in a clean button-down shirt, tears quietly threatening. Mayor Halvers stepped forward with a binder and a proud smile. "We are gathered here," he began, "not because of status or wealth or expectations, but because love showed up where no one was looking." He turned to Daniel. "Your vows?" Daniel took Evelyn's hands. "I never thought I'd fall in love again," he began. "But you, Evelyn, you didn't just walk into my life. You built something inside it." He paused, voice thick. "You taught me that loving someone doesn't mean saving them. It means standing beside them while they save themselves." He squeezed her hands. "And I promise, for as long as I can breathe, to be your quiet, steady place. Your wrench when something breaks. Your porch light when the world goes dark." Evelyn blinked rapidly, fighting tears. Then it was her turn. She inhaled slowly. "I spent most of my life in rooms filled with polished words and empty promises," she said. "But then I walked into a garage and met a man who didn't try to impress me. He just showed up every single time." Her voice wavered. "You didn't give me flowers, Daniel. You gave me roots. You didn't give me diamonds. You gave me Lily." She glanced at the girl who beamed through missing teeth and mismatched shoes. "And today I don't just take you as my husband. I take this whole life, the oil stains, the early mornings, the quiet nights, the messy, beautiful realness." Then she pulled the tiny wrench from her dress and held it between them. "This is the only ring I need." The crowd was quiet. Some sniffles, some laughter. When the mayor pronounced them husband and wife, no one clapped at first. Instead, someone let out a whoop. Then came the cheers. Then the music, played on a dusty guitar and 2 spoons by a retired mechanic named Bobby Dean. Daniel and Evelyn didn't have a first dance, they had a first walk. Through the crowd, hand in hand, greeted by hugs and pies and Polaroid cameras clicking. Lily stuck stickers on everyone's shirt that said, "Team Wrench." At one point, someone handed Daniel a beer and Evelyn a lemonade. They sat on the tailgate of a red pickup truck and looked at the town, their town, gathered, laughing, warm and whole. Hours later, when the sun dipped and the chairs emptied, Evelyn stood barefoot on the gravel, watching the last guests drive away. Daniel joined her, wrapping his flannel jacket over her shoulders. "You okay, Mrs. Brooks?" he asked. She smiled. "I like the sound of that. You hungry?" "I could eat an entire wedding cake by myself," he chuckled. "Too bad we only had peach cobbler and lemon squares." "Even better," she whispered. They stood in silence. No fireworks, just crickets. A soft breeze. A new kind of quiet. Then Evelyn leaned her head on his shoulder. "Thank you," she murmured. "For what?" "For giving me a life where I can breathe again." Daniel kissed her hair. "You gave me one where I can believe again." And under the soft golden light of a porch bulb, beside a child who was already fast asleep in the back seat of their truck, 2 people who never asked for a second chance found exactly that. Not in the spotlight, but in each other. The letter came on a Tuesday. No return address. Just her name, Evelyn Hale Brooks, scrawled in tight cursive on the envelope. She found it tucked in the mailbox between a mechanic's supply catalogue and a water bill. For a moment, she thought it was junk. But something about the handwriting made her pause. She slid her finger under the flap, and just like that, the past she had carefully folded away opened wide again. The letter was short. "Evelyn, I heard about the wedding, about the garage. About him. I'm in town, and I'd like to talk. One last time, no drama, just closure. Colin." She sat down on the porch steps, knees weak. Colin Hayes. The name tasted like rust on her tongue. Once upon a time, he had been the reason she stopped believing in men with promises. He was the lesson. The fall. The warning sign. Their relationship ended not with shouting but silence. He had walked out the day she lost the child they were expecting, offering no hand to hold, no goodbye, no compassion. He vanished, until now. That night, she didn't tell Daniel. She couldn't, not yet. She needed to breathe. To think. To decide whether this door should stay shut, or if opening it might finally let something out. The next day, she sat across from Renee Carter, the social worker turned friend, now sipping coffee in the break room at the community garage. Evelyn slid the letter across the table. Renee read it slowly, then looked up. "You going to meet him?" Evelyn stared out the window. "I don't know. I don't want to lie to Daniel, but I also don't want to dig up ghosts." Renee nodded. "Maybe it's not about him anymore. Maybe it's about you." On Friday, Evelyn went. Not to forgive, not to rekindle, just to finish. They met in the corner booth of Hillcrest Diner, the place where every good secret in Maplewood either started or ended. Colin looked older, not worn down, but definitely softened. No tie. No expensive watch, just a man with grey streaks at his temples and something like regret in his eyes. "You look happy," he said. Evelyn folded her hands. "I am," he nodded. "I deserved worse than silence." "I know that now." She didn't answer. He looked at her. "Back then, I thought love was something you didn't have to fight for. That if it got hard, you could leave and start over." She raised an eyebrow. "You didn't leave because it was hard. You left because I was hurting. You just didn't want to be there for it." He flinched, but didn't argue. "I'm not here to ask for anything," Colin said softly. "I just wanted to say it out loud, that I was wrong, and I hope he treats you better than I ever did." Evelyn's voice was steady. "He does, not because he's perfect, but because he's present." Colin smiled sadly. "That's rare." She stood, placing a 20 on the table. "No, Colin, it's just real. You just never stayed long enough to find out." And with that, she left. When she walked through the door that evening, Daniel was at the stove, flipping pancakes for dinner. Lily sat at the counter, drawing cartoon versions of their family. Evelyn stood for a long moment watching them. Then she said quietly, "There's something I need to tell you." Daniel turned, instantly alert. "I met with someone today," she said. "His name is Colin, someone from my past." Daniel set down the spatula. "I didn't tell you before because I didn't know what I was going to do. I needed to see it through, to end something that started long before you and me." He didn't speak, so she stepped closer. He apologized. "And I told him the truth, that you are everything he wasn't." Daniel looked at her, eyes searching. "Did it help?" She smiled gently. "It did, because for the first time I walked away without carrying the weight." He studied her face. Then he reached over, brushed her hair behind her ear, and kissed her forehead. "I trust you," he said. And that was it. No drama. No fight, just trust. That night she crawled into bed beside him and curled into the crook of his arm. The world was quiet again, except for the sound of a page turning. Lily, in the other room, was reading aloud to her teddy bear. And they lived not in a castle, but in a house with creaky floors and one warm bed, and that was better than magic. Evelyn smiled, because she knew the truth. Some stories didn't need fixing. They just needed finishing. The evening crept in slowly, wearing the kind of gold that makes even the cracked sidewalk outside look sacred. Inside their modest home, Evelyn Brooks stirred a pot of soup on the stove. The kitchen smelled of thyme, roasted carrots, and something warm that had nothing to do with ingredients. It smelled like home. Behind her, Lily sat at the table, scribbling wildly in her coloring book, tongue poking out in concentration. Are we still making banana bread tonight? Lily asked, not looking up. If your dad remembered to get the bananas, Evelyn teased, turning down the heat. The front door creaked open just then. I heard that, Daniel called, stepping into the kitchen with 2 paper bags and a sheepish grin. And yes, I remembered the bananas. And also, he pulled out a small box, cinnamon rolls from Marla's. Lily gasped. You're the best, he winked. Don't tell your mom. I'm trying to win favorite parent status tonight. Evelyn shook her head, smiling. Too late. I already let her lick the bowl. They all laughed. Just laughter. No tension. No secrets. No ghosts from the past. Just the sound of people choosing each other over and over again. After dinner, Lily fell asleep in the living room, curled up beneath the quilt Evelyn's aunt had made decades ago. Crumbs still clung to her lips from the banana bread. Daniel scooped her up gently and carried her to bed. When he returned, Evelyn was on the porch swing, a blanket over her lap, holding 2 steaming mugs. I made you tea, she said. He joined her, the swing creaking just slightly under their weight. They sat in silence for a moment, watching the night deepen. The stars blinked slowly into view, one by one. Do you ever wonder what we'd be doing right now if things had gone differently? He asked. She sipped her tea. Sometimes, but then I think I might have still been someone else's idea of who I should be, sitting in a penthouse, wondering how I got so far from my own heart. He nodded. And I'd be under someone else's hood, fixing their engine, ignoring my own. They smiled at each other. Then Evelyn leaned her head on his shoulder. Do you know what today is? She asked. He frowned. Wednesday? No. It's exactly 1 year since we finished the floor at the garage. He laughed. You remember that? I remember everything, she said. Especially the way you looked at me when I dropped the wrench on your foot. He grinned. True love starts with a limp. They sat a while longer. A dog barked somewhere down the road. A wind chime clinked on the neighbor's porch. Crickets played back up to the melody of stillness. Then Evelyn whispered something so soft, it nearly got lost in the breeze. Thank you for building a life with me that doesn't need an audience. Daniel turned to her. You were never the kind of woman who needed applause, he said. You just needed someone who stayed when the curtain dropped. She exhaled. That truth, so simple, settled like peace in her bones. Later that night, Evelyn tucked the tiny engraved wrench into Lily's memory box, the one with her drawings, the napkin from the day Daniel spilled coffee on Evelyn's notes, and the Polaroid of their wedding under the old mechanic sign. Then she climbed into bed and kissed Daniel goodnight. He was already half asleep, one hand under his pillow, the other reaching for hers, and somewhere in that quiet house, with no mansion, no gold chandeliers, no headlines, a family existed, not loud, not perfect, but real, and enough. Because in the end, it wasn't the wrench or the vows or the past that defined them. It was the simple decision, made again and again, to choose each other. Every ordinary day, in every small, extraordinary way,